can still hear my dad's voice echoing across the table like it was yesterday. Sharp, casual, and absolutely soul-crushing. We were halfway through dinner, my fork paused midair, when he looked right at me and said, "Honestly, sometimes I wish Mike was our only child." There wasn't any joking tone. No smirk, no sign he didn't mean it. He just stabbed another piece of food, chewed, and kept talking to my brother like he hadn't just erased me from existence. And as messed up as that sentence was, the part that hurt even more came later that same night when my mom called me crying. Not to check on me, not to apologize, not to comfort me after what my dad said. She called demanding money. Money for a problem they helped create. And here I am asking you, seriously, would you have done what I did? Was I wrong for drawing the line? Or did I finally stand up for myself after years of being treated like I was optional? To explain how all of that exploded at once, I have to go way back, because this wasn't some isolated moment where my dad slipped and said something out of anger. This was the tip of a mountain made out of years of favoritism, guilt, expectation, and emotional neglect. I'm the oldest. I was the experiment child, the one who faced all the strict rules and unreasonable standards. My brother Mike came 5 years later, and it was like the sun rose specifically for him. From as early as I can remember, the narrative was already set. I was the responsible one, the mature one, the one who could handle things. Meanwhile, Mike was the sensitive one, the special one, the baby of the family. My childhood was waking up early, packing my own lunch, doing chores and staying quiet. Mike's childhood was praise, treats, leniency, and excuses. When I forgot to do a chore, I got grounded, lectured, or yelled at. When Mike forgot, they laughed and said, "He's just a kid." Funny how I was never allowed to just be a kid. School only made the gap wider. When I brought home good grades, it was expected, barely acknowledged. That's what you're supposed to do. But when Mike brought home average grades, suddenly it was celebrations and pizza nights because he tried his best. Money also worked differently depending on which one of us was asking. I'd get told we were struggling whenever I needed new clothes, field trip money, or sports fees. Meanwhile, Mike somehow always ended up with new gadgets, gaming systems, and toys. When I questioned it, I was labeled jealous or dramatic. I learned early that there was no point arguing. Love in my house was conditional, and the condition for me seemed to be proving non-stop that I was worthy, and somehow never quite making it. By the time I was 16, I got a part-time job because I hated begging and being made to feel guilty for needing basic things. I started buying my own clothes, paying my own phone bill, and even chipping in for groceries because my mom would say things like, "If you're working, you should help the family." But when Mike turned 16, suddenly the philosophy changed. Now teenagers shouldn't have to worry about money. He needed to focus on school, which is hilarious considering he didn't really focus on school either. He rarely worked a single day in his teen years, and if he did, it was some half-hearted job he quit because the manager was unfair. And every time something fell apart, my parents swooped in, paid his bills, and blamed everyone except him. I grew up. I left home. Not because I hated my parents, but because I had no room to breathe there. I scraped through college with student loans and exhaustion. I worked late nights, cried in bathrooms, ate ramen when my bank account hit single digits. I built my own life piece by painful piece while still visiting on holidays, still buying gifts, still trying to maintain a relationship that always felt lopsided. Meanwhile, Mike floated through his early 20s like a tourist, dropped out of classes, moved in with different friends, lost jobs because he didn't vibe with the environment, racked up debt. But in my parents' eyes, he was still their precious boy who just needed time. They always framed my independence as coldness and his dependency as love. Now fast forward to the dinner that finally broke something in me. My parents invited me over, saying they missed me and wanted to have a family night. I actually felt hopeful. The house smelled like childhood. My mom had cooked one of Mike's favorite meals, and everyone was chatty. I tried to ignore the fact that everything felt subtly centered around him as usual. My dad started bragging about Mike, but what he was praising didn't even make sense. He was proud because Mike had decided to move back home to get on his feet. Translation: he got kicked out of yet another apartment for not paying rent. I said gently, "Well, I hope this time works out better." My dad gave me a look like I'd just insulted the family. Then he launched into a little speech about loyalty and family, and how not everyone wants to run off and act like they're better than where they came from. That hit, because that's how they always viewed me leaving. Not as survival, but as betrayal. I said quietly, "Dad, I didn't leave because I thought I was better. I left because I needed to build a future." He rolled his eyes like I was rehearsing some dramatic line. Then, without any build-up, he said that sentence. "Sometimes I wish Mike was our only child." No pause, no hesitation. It was delivered casually, like saying the weather felt nice. I felt my stomach drop. My chest tightened. I looked at my mom for support, but she avoided eye contact. I felt invisible. I wanted to scream to say, "Do you hear yourself?" But instead, I just swallowed the lump in my throat, finished my food in silence, helped clean up out of habit, and left. I cried the whole drive home. I cried not just for what he said, but for every time I'd hoped one day I would finally be enough for them. Later that night, my phone buzzed. "Mom." I hesitated, thinking maybe she wanted to talk. Maybe this was finally going to be the conversation we needed. I answered, and the first thing I heard was her sobbing. My heart jumped. Then the words came out. "Honey, please, we're in trouble. We need your help financially. Please send some money, just this once." My brain stalled. No mention of dinner, no acknowledgement, no apology. Just straight to the emergency request. I asked, "What happened?" She told me they were behind on the mortgage. They didn't want Dad to know she was calling me. They needed about $500. And then came the part that stung even worse. She admitted they had been covering most of Mike's expenses. Car payments, credit cards, some loans, food, gas, everything. They'd even taken out a small personal loan to help him get back on track. And shocker, he didn't pay it back. I said quietly, "Mom, Dad literally said he wished I didn't exist tonight." She sighed like I was being inconvenient and answered, "You know he doesn't mean things like that. He gets upset, but you're the responsible one. We can count on you." That's when the realization hit me full force. I wasn't their daughter in their minds. I was a resource, a financial safety net with a face, someone they'd emotionally neglect, dismiss, insult, then expect help from because I was capable. I told her I needed time to think. She pushed harder. She reminded me of all they'd done for me. She said I owed them. That word, owed, twisted something inside me. Over the next few days, the pressure got worse. Texts, missed calls, guilt trips. Dad finally messaged, not to address what he'd said, but to accuse me of being selfish for hesitating. Meanwhile, Mike was silent, enjoying the comfort of living at home like the prince he always was. I replayed my entire childhood in my head. Every dismissal, every unfair comparison, every sacrifice I'd made while they poured love and resources into Mike like he was their only investment. The more I thought, the clearer it became. If I kept giving, nothing would ever change. They'd never admit they were wrong. They'd never take accountability. And Mike would never grow up. So I called my mom back and told her I wasn't sending money. My voice shook, but I meant it. I told her I loved her, but I refused to keep bailing them out of problems they created. I said if they could afford to support Mike, they could handle their mortgage. She snapped. She cried harder, accused me of not caring, said good daughters don't abandon their parents. I said calm as I could, good parents don't tell their kids they wish they didn't exist. She hung up. The backlash was immediate. My dad left a long voicemail filled with insults and emotional blackmail. Extended family got involved, saying they heard I refused to help, and asking how I could be so cold. Nobody cared to ask why. Nobody asked what was said at dinner. I was the villain for setting a boundary, and honestly, for a while, the guilt almost broke me. I lay awake wondering if I was heartless. But then something happened. Days turned into weeks. The calls slowed. The silence grew. For the first time in years, I wasn't being treated like emergency funding. I sat in my apartment and actually felt peace for once, even though my chest still ached with sadness. Then finally my mom called again. Her voice was different, not manipulative, not guilt-soaked, just tired. She told me they'd gone to the bank, arranged payment plans, cut back on expenses, and I thought this is the big one, finally told Mike he had to get a job and contribute. He resisted at first, but when the house was truly at risk, he panicked. Suddenly, work wasn't too stressful anymore. Suddenly, responsibility mattered. My mom didn't exactly apologize, but she said, "I didn't realize how much we relied on you. I guess we assumed you'd always come through." That sentence alone showed me everything. They had never seen my help as generosity. They saw it as obligation, and I told her gently I wouldn't be their financial solution anymore. She cried, but this time, It sounded like someone starting to understand reality instead of manipulating it. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Before I tell you how things really changed after that, pause for a second and tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have sent the money to keep the peace? Or would you have said no, like I did, and risk your family turning on you? Months passed. The dynamic shifted. My dad hasn't apologized outright, but the tone changed. No more open jabs about me thinking I'm better. Our conversations are distant, more careful, like he knows he crossed a line, even if pride won't let him admit it. My mom asks about my job, my friends, my life, actual interest instead of circling around to money. And Mike, he's distant, maybe resentful, maybe embarrassed. He works now, complains about bills, and occasionally drops passive comments about how hard adult life is. And every time I hear that, part of me wants to say, yeah, welcome to the life I was living at 16. But the real transformation wasn't theirs. It was mine. I had to grieve the parents. I imagined the ones who would be defended me at that dinner table, who would have noticed my hurt before noticing their bank account. I had to accept they love me imperfectly, sometimes selfishly, sometimes conditionally. And I had to build boundaries, which felt like betrayal at first, because I was raised to believe that sacrificing myself was the definition of love. Now I know this. Saying no doesn't mean you don't care. Sometimes it means you finally learned to care about yourself. Do I still replay that dinner sometimes? Yes. Do I still hear my dad's voice wishing me away? Yes. Does it still hurt? Absolutely. But I also remember the version of me sitting silently all those years. Always giving, always bending, always apologizing. And I know that if I hadn't finally stood up, nothing would have changed. So now I really want to know, do you think I did the right thing? Was I cruel for saying no? Or was I finally drawing a line after a lifetime of being the invisible kid, who only mattered when money was involved? If you were on my side, like this video, if you think I should have handled it differently, let me know why. I genuinely want to read your thoughts. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Thanks for sticking with me through this, and I'll see you all in the next story.